Feedback that I've been given over the years that have been most relevant to me has been the ones that really give me a chance to grow and reflect.
The more candid that feedback, sometimes the more harsh that feedback, as long as we all agree that we're in this together and we're supporting a common goal, it becomes incredibly powerful.
By doing that, we create an environment that is open, that is trustworthy, and as a result, we can all have open dialogues, open communications, and we can all get better at what we all do.
Hey PAC, welcome to this module about providing feedback. There are a total of 3 modules about feedback: providing, requesting, and receiving, and all of them are between 10 and 15 minutes, so we hope you can stay tuned for all 3. Before we begin, let me introduce myself, Neely Kaur, one of the talent coaches, Jen Franco, and Raja Marzouk.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, PAC. Feedback is really so important to our culture at Blue Wolf. We realize that all of us, from top leadership all the way throughout the organization, have a huge opportunity to grow leaps and bounds by receiving and providing valuable feedback. We also realize that it's really hard to request and provide feedback, so we want to help you with providing some frameworks, some tips and tricks of providing feedback. So let's begin. So Gallup has provided a lot of information about employee engagement, and they have found that giving no or little feedback on an employee's performance is even worse than focusing on the negative.
Hey, Nilu, this is a really interesting factoid, and I'm wondering whether it's linked to this idea, and I think Jen Franco had done a training around it, around there being an essential human need for affirmation. And this sounds weird, but maybe when you are getting constructive feedback, it means that somebody actually has taken the time to invest in you, even if, because they're taking time to tell you how you can improve. And it sort of speaks to this, essential, need to feel connected, maybe. Or I could be totally off.
I think you're right on, Raj. I think you're right on. It's interesting to me that even negative feedback creates a culture of engagement. But to your point, it's actually showing that they care enough to share with you so that you can be better than you were before, or to encourage you to keep doing something. So, but on the negative piece of it, yeah, it's surprising to me, but I believe it. I think it's engaging people in all aspects of their daily work.
That's completely correct. Feedback actually does matter. So let me provide you with some tips for providing constructive feedback. So there's actually 2 types of feedback: reinforcing and developmental. Reinforcing actually reinforces specific skills or behaviors and outcomes, and developmental builds or improves capabilities and refocuses the person's attention on the correct results. So let's go through a few tips on providing constructive feedback. So the first is relatively soon. Don't wait too long to offer feedback to another PAC member. Give yourself time to think it through before writing and sending it, because once it's out there, you cannot remove it. And the second is a positive intention. Keep a frame of mind that you are offering feedback because you really want to help and encourage your colleague to grow and not harm them. Be specific. Don't use general statements alone. Include additional details to provide feedback rich enough so your colleagues can clearly think through his or her next steps or changes to make. No judging. Be sure to exclude any statements that sound disapproving or based on personal judgment. Also, never should anyone. Instead of saying you should stop doing this, word it or rephrase it in a way that doesn't sound judgmental or negative. Consider other ways to handle the situation.
Sorry, I just have to ask, did you just say don't should on yourself?
I did.
I was worried, too.
You did say should, right?
I did.
Well, so let me just feed off that, too, because I think that's a really good point about the judging piece. You can phrase things in a way that will not sound judgmental, because I know that, intentions, the positive intention piece of it, right, your intentions are pure. You just want to help them get to the next level, or, give them ideas or suggestions that there are areas that maybe this person could improve. So when it comes to trying not to sound judgy, instead of saying, to your point, you should start XYZ. You should start doing this. Instead, you would say, consider trying XYZ. And that way it just conveys this communication to the person receiving the feedback that you're not telling them what to do, but you're maybe suggesting some ideas that might spark them to have other ideas.
I actually, Jen, I love that because I've noticed a tendency in myself. Oftentimes I will give feedback around lessons that I've learned myself the hard way. And so in a sense, I'll always express to that person that I'm giving feedback to that, hey, you know, I had the same challenge, and here's something that I tried, the solution for it. And I find that helps me stay away from sounding judgy. I like that word. It helps me because I sort of remember that I was in that same position in their shoes, and so I'm able to really like empathize and kind of realize like how tough it is to solve for whatever challenge. But that's really good advice. Thank you.
Sure.
Perfect. And so let's continue. So observed behavior. Provide feedback on what someone told you about a colleague. Stick to providing feedback only to what you've actually observed.
Boy, that's a really
others.
big point. I'm sorry, I do want to say that is a really good point because it's really easy to include hearsay that you've heard from somebody else while you're trying to provide feedback to a person. So I think it is really important to make sure that you just sort of like deliver what you witnessed, you know, what your interaction was with that person, and not what anybody else has told you their interaction or observations have been. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's major. I think that this was actually a topic of conversation for our team at some point or another where we discussed how important it is just in terms of culture that you give feedback on what you've observed. You know, we work in a pretty like remote environment, and so in a sense you're really doing somebody a disservice if you are providing them feedback on something that you heard that they did as opposed to something that they observed. So it's about, you know, I think at minimum some sort of respect for every single pack member that you just give feedback on what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
That's a really good point. And let's continue. So impact on others. Help your colleague understand the impact of the behavior on other people.
So, Raj, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, Nilu. You guys, I think that this is often a myth, right? Because I will speak for myself in that if I'm giving a presentation or if I'm on a phone call, especially a phone call, because all you've got is tone of voice. You don't have the physical, and like being able to look somebody in the eyes or watching their gestures or posture. So it's important to, I would very much cherish receiving feedback from somebody where I could gain an understanding of how that impacted the person or the people that I was interacting with.
Oh, Jen, I think I have the perfect example for you. So you know how I usually get super excited on calls when I have an idea?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just interrupt people, and it's really terrible, and it doesn't make them feel great. So somebody gave me feedback on that tendency of mine, and I had no idea what the impact was on others when I was doing it because I was in my own head so excited about the idea. So I think that that's really, really a good piece of advice to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I know I will.
I will too, yep.
Okay, future focus. Don't bring up events that happened in the past that are similar to the particular situation for which you are providing feedback. Keep your comments focused on ways to grow in the future. And lastly, don't under or oversell. Don't go overboard with trying to convince the person that the feedback is true. Resist the urge to try and prove your point when providing feedback. Likewise, don't cut it too short. Offer a good balance of sharing what you observed, the impact it had on you or other team members, and what you recommend to expand so that they can grow and learn for the next time around. And now we want to talk about how to provide feedback constructively. So when we provide feedback at Blue Wolf, we use the wins, learns, and changes models, but sometimes that becomes a little blurry or a little cloudy on how to actually use it in instances with feedback. So we're going to talk today about the action, impact, and change, the AIC framework within the wins, learns, and change model. So action is a specific behavior, the impact is the impact of the behavior, and the change is the things the person can do next time to improve. And similarly, in a win situation, the C could actually be continue because we want to encourage that behavior. So let me show you what that actually looks like. So with the wins, learns, and changes, that allows you to organize your thoughts, and with action, impact, and change, it helps you rephrase the feedback. So if you look at the table, you'll notice that when we're talking about a win, we can focus on the action, the impact, and what behavior we want to continue. And likewise with learns and changes, we focus on the action, the impact, and the change.
Okay,
so let's walk through a few examples so this becomes crystal clear for you.
Can I get clarification then before we go into that? Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So while I'm doing a wins, learns, and change with as part of me organizing my feedback about maybe a particular presentation you gave, when I look at the wins, when I provide you with what the win was, I'm also going to share with you specifically what the action was that you did, the impact that it had, and that I recommend you keep doing it. And the same thing with learns and changes, right? So if there's something that I think is a learn, then within that, when I'm describing the learn, I'm going to say this was the action, this was the impact it had, and this is what I would recommend as far as changing it. So am I getting that right?
Yes,
AIC is within
correct.
wins, learns, change. Okay, great.
Oh, so then the AIC is really just helping you to develop, really good content within the framework of wins, learns, and changes.
Yes. And when we go through the examples, you'll see exactly what I mean.
Cool. All right.
So let's walk through an example with John. So John, it's a feedback about general performance, and John is great at building trust with clients. So what is the action? Specifically, he invests time to grow, to know the client, asks good questions, and anticipates their needs. The impact is that as a result, John comes across as a very friendly and personable Blue Wolf employee. It helps to establish a great rapport with the client, and so the continue, because this is a win, is that we want to encourage John to continue to do this to build great client relationships. So you see we've used the wins, learns, and changes model, and we're actually giving him action, impact, and the behavior to continue. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's specific to the win that you're referencing.
Correct.
Got it.
You know what I really love about this is that then he knows exactly what behaviors to continue, because we didn't just give him a generic win list. Great, you're a trusted advisor, John. Awesome. I mean, that could mean so many things, but we gave him specifics so he knows exactly which behaviors he should continue to do.
Right, exactly. And in the next example with John, we'll sort of go through the same process, but this time it's a learn or a change. So it's about written communication. And the action is that John frequently uses shorthand and makes several spelling errors. And the impact is that it makes it seem that he's not paying attention to detail, which could impact the trust that his clients have with him. So the change is that we are encouraging John, as he moves forward with interacting with the client, that he uses spell check and carefully reviews his emails before sending. So again, we've used win, learn, change, and we've done an action, impact, and change within the wins, learns, change. Does that make sense?
These are great examples. Thanks, Neil.
Perfect. So I'm going to have Jen walk you through a couple of examples with Mary.
Cool. So this is about a specific event, right? I was on site with Mary, and she was giving a presentation to a client. And so the win that I saw was that she had great eye contact. So as I'm explaining this in detail to her, the action is that in her presentation, she really connected with everybody in the room because of that excellent eye contact. The impact that it had as a result is that she came across as really confident and knowledgeable and trustworthy. And as I was watching the room, I could see the client smiling back at Mary, and I heard them say afterwards that they were very impressed. So continue, I want to share with Mary, keep connecting with clients by engaging them with that great eye contact. So additional feedback I gave her about that same presentation is on the learning changes about the presentation structure itself. So from an action perspective, Mary didn't share an agenda or a roadmap at the start of her presentation. The impact as a result is that the clients maybe got lost, right? The clients that were there and maybe lost them at some point, and they were maybe confused about what Mary would be covering that day. So the suggested change would be to consider providing an agenda and explaining what the client will have an understanding of after the presentation is done.
Perfect. Does that make sense, Raj?
Yep, that totally makes sense. I think I just also needed 2 clear examples on how to use both models. But yeah, that makes sense.
Perfect. So what's been your personal experience with providing feedback, Jen or Raj?
Hey, Jen, I can start.
Okay.
So my personal experience ranges from I've prepared and everything goes as planned to I totally fumble it and I come off as either really judgy or my feedback doesn't make the impact that it needs to make. I think that what I really got out of what you shared today, Nilu, is sort of this model. I love the models. I love like having a sort of tool in my toolbox to use. But I realized even when I do get feedback in a wins, learns, changes model, right, framework, oftentimes my wins, learns, and changes are not specific enough. Even though I think they are, like they're not specific enough to point to the behaviors to either continue to do or to change. And I think that this AIC is really going to help those wins, learns, changes be more targeted. So, yeah, I'm going to, that'll be my change going forward in terms of providing feedback is to leverage this tool.
And I agree with you, Raj. I like that too because, you know, as I'm in My Wolf and I'm, you know, using the tool to provide feedback, you know, in the description section, there's nothing that leads me as to what to say. So having this framework in place, knowing that, you know, as a company, we've been using wins, learns, and changes since I've been here and well before that, but also having the additional help with using AIC and describing the action and what that impact had and then what maybe a suggested change would be or what they should continue doing really helps me put words together so that I can share that information intelligently. The other thing I think that I got from this was, for me moving forward, is that I have a self-realization now that I really undersell feedback, and I think it's because I'm afraid they're going to be angry with me. I think, you know, or they'll be offended or upset, and so many times I think I hold back, and I don't really share maybe some suggested changes or my complete thought because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And so I think that positive intention piece of it is important to have, and I have that in, you know, in me. That's just sort of my DNA. But, you know, I'm probably really good at underselling it, and instead of just, you know, delivering the information to the person, right? Here was the action that, you know, or the behavior, and here was the impact that it had, and then here's what you might want to change, or, you know, here's what you should continue doing as I'm sharing wins, learns, and changes with folks. So that is the big takeaway for me.
Perfect. Thank you both for sharing. So just to recap, I want to give you the big 5, feedback tips and best practices. So number 1, specificity is key. Let's focus on specific things and not general. Focus on behaviors or actions and not the person. Use the wins, learns, and changes model to provide or request feedback. Provide and request feedback often and timely. And of course, lastly, don't forget that feedback is truly a gift. So there's 2 other modules. One of them is called Receiving Feedback, and the other is Requesting Feedback. Stay tuned to the end of this video to get information on who to contact if you have any questions about feedback. Thank you again for listening, and thank you, Jen and Raja, for participating.